The fluorescent lights of Rosenthal's fine jewelry cast harsh shadows across Tanisha Beaumont's face as she stood frozen, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Time seemed to slow as Mr. Rosenthal's accusation hung in the air between them. I saw you take it. The silver heart necklace. It was right here, and now it's gone. His voice carried through the store, turning heads, drawing stares. Empty your purse, or I'm calling security. Tanisha's hands trembled, not from guilt, but from a cocktail of shock, humiliation, and rising anger. She clutched her purse tighter against her body, dignified despite the public shaming. I didn't take anything, she said, her voice steady but strained. You're making a mistake. Beside her, 8-year-old Imani's small fingers curled into her mother's hand, squeezing tight. The child's eyes, wide with confusion and fear, darted between her mother's face and the red-faced store owner. Today was Mother's Day, supposed to be their special day together, now transforming into something ugly before her innocent eyes. Mommy, Imani whispered, her voice small. Tanisha saw a security guard approaching from the corner of her eye, his hand resting casually on his holster, his face already set with judgment. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below with your city or country. It's amazing to see our community tuning in from all over the world. All right, back to our story. Just hours earlier, the morning had begun with the sweet scent of slightly burnt pancakes and the sound of childish giggles. Sunlight had streamed through the kitchen windows of Tanisha's modest 2-bedroom apartment, casting a golden glow on Imani's determined face as she carefully carried a tray toward her mother's bedroom. Careful now, baby, Grandma Ellis had cautioned, following close behind her granddaughter. At 72, Grandma Ellis moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had learned that rushing rarely served any purpose. Her salt and pepper hair was wrapped in her signature colorful headscarf, and wisdom lines mapped her face like ancient rivers. I got it, Grandma, Imani had insisted, her tongue poking out the corner of her mouth in concentration. The tray wobbled slightly, orange juice threatening to spill, but Imani steadied it with the careful precision of a child undertaking a mission of paramount importance. Tanisha had been awake for 20 minutes, listening to the conspiratorial whispers and clattering pans from the kitchen. She'd smiled into her pillow, pretending sleep as the bedroom door creaked open. Imani's excited breathing gave her away seconds before her announcement. Happy Mother's Day, Mommy, Imani had proclaimed, pride radiating from her in waves as bright as the morning sun. Tanisha had sat up, her face a perfect mask of surprise. Oh my goodness. What's all this? We made your favorite, blueberry pancakes with whipped cream, and I put the blueberries on top in a smiley face, Imani had explained, carefully setting the tray across her mother's lap. Indeed, 2 misshapen pancakes stared up with haphazard blueberry eyes and a slightly lopsided smile. They're beautiful, baby. The most beautiful pancakes I've ever seen, Tanisha had said, meaning every word as she pulled her daughter into a hug. Grandma Ellis had settled herself at the foot of the bed, smiling at the pair. Happy Mother's Day, Tanisha. My sweet girl, you've become such a wonderful mother yourself. Her eyes had glistened slightly. Your daddy would be so proud. Tanisha had felt that familiar bittersweet pang at the mention of her father, gone 5 years now. She'd nodded, unable to speak for a moment, then cleared her throat. Thank you, Mama, for everything you taught me. The morning had unfolded lazily after that, a luxury for Tanisha, who typically spent her Sundays preparing for the week ahead at the county library, where she worked as the children's program coordinator. But Mother's Day was different. Mother's Day was for pancakes and handmade cards decorated with excessive glitter that would surely be found around the apartment for months to come. We should get Grandma something nice, Imani had suggested as they cleared the dishes together. Since it's her Mother's Day too. That's a wonderful idea, Tanisha had agreed, heart swelling with pride at her daughter's thoughtfulness. Maybe we could go to the shopping center? Get her something sparkly? You know how Grandma loves her jewelry. Grandma Ellis had waved them off with a knowing smile. Go on now, you two. I need my Sunday rest. These old bones aren't what they used to be. But the gleam in her eye suggested she knew exactly what they were planning. And so, After church service at Bethel AME, where Tanisha had received warm hugs and Mother's Day blessings from the congregation that had watched her grow from girl to woman to mother, they had headed to Metro Shopping Center. The mall bustled with Mother's Day shoppers, families celebrating, children dragging fathers from store to store in search of last-minute gifts, mothers being treated to lunch at the food court. Tanisha and Imani had wandered contentedly, hand in hand, their church clothes exchanged for comfortable jeans and t-shirts, but Tanisha's hair still elegantly twisted up from service. They'd stopped for ice cream, a special treat, before making their way to Rosenthal's Fine Jewelry, a family-owned store that had stood in Metro Mall for over 30 years. The moment they'd stepped inside, Tanisha had felt it, that slight shift in atmosphere, the barely perceptible straightening of the sales associate's posture, the subtle tracking of eyes as she moved among the glass cases. It was a feeling as familiar to her as her own reflection, one she'd known since childhood, one she'd hoped foolishly might someday fade away. But she'd squared her shoulders and smiled anyway, her librarian's demeanor professional and pleasant as always. "Good afternoon," she'd greeted the young sales associate, whose name tag read Brittany. "We're looking for something special for my mother. For Mother's Day." Brittany had smiled, a practiced retail expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course. Did you have something specific in mind?" While Tanisha described her mother's taste in jewelry, classic, nothing too flashy, preferably silver, Imani had wandered a few steps away, her eyes wide with wonder at the sparkling treasures behind glass. The store wasn't crowded, just a middle-aged white couple being helped by Mr. Rosenthal himself at the far counter, and an older black man browsing watches near the entrance. "Mommy, look at this one," Imani had called, her small finger pointing at a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. "It looks like the one in Grandma's picture with Grandpa." Tanisha had joined her daughter, bending down to look. "It does, doesn't it? That's a good eye you've got." She'd straightened up, looking for Brittany. "Could we see this one, please?" But it was Mr. Rosenthal who approached, having finished with the other customers. In his 60s, with gray hair and glasses perched low on his nose, he'd given Tanisha a quick once-over before turning his attention to the case. "This one?" he'd asked, pointing to a different necklace. "No, the heart one," Imani had piped up helpfully. Mr. Rosenthal had nodded, taking out his keys to unlock the case. He'd removed the necklace, holding it up for them to see. "This is sterling silver, with a small diamond chip in the center. Very good quality. It's $189. The price was at the upper limit of what Tanisha had planned to spend, but the necklace really was perfect for her mother. She nodded. "We'll take it." Mr. Rosenthal had placed the necklace in a velvet box and moved toward the register. Imani, still fascinated by the jewelry, had continued to peer into the cases while Tanisha followed the owner to complete the purchase. That's when everything had changed. Mr. Rosenthal had suddenly turned back to the display case, his brow furrowed. He'd looked from the case to Tanisha, then back again. There was another necklace here. A silver heart with blue topaz. "Where is it?" Tanisha had blinked, confused by the abrupt shift. "I'm sorry. The blue heart necklace. It was right here, next to this one." His voice had risen slightly, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "I don't know what you're talking about," Tanisha had replied, a cold feeling spreading through her chest as she realized what was happening. "We only looked at the one necklace." Mr. Rosenthal's face had hardened. "I inventory my cases every morning. There were 2 heart necklaces in this display. Now there's only one." His gaze had flicked to Tanisha's purse, then to Imani, who had now sensed the tension and moved closer to her mother. "Are you accusing me of something?" Tanisha had asked, her voice low but carrying the weight of dignity her grandmother had instilled in her from childhood. And that's when he'd said it, loudly, publicly, without hesitation. "I saw you take it. The silver heart necklace. It was right here, and now it's gone. Empty your purse, or I'm calling security." Now, standing beneath the harsh fluorescent lights with curious and judgmental eyes upon her, Tanisha felt a familiar burn of injustice. She'd experienced versions of this before, being followed in stores, questioned about her presence in certain neighborhoods, asked for additional ID at the bank where she'd been a customer for years. but never so blatantly, so publicly, and never with Imani watching. The security guard approached, his face impassive. "Ma'am, would you mind coming with me to the office? We can sort this out privately." Tanisha stood firm, despite the trembling in her knees. "I've done nothing wrong. I'm not going anywhere." Imani pressed against her side, and Tanisha could feel her daughter's fear like a physical weight. Around them, the store had gone quiet. The Sunday shoppers transformed into an audience for this humiliating spectacle. "Mommy, I want to go home," Imani whispered, a slight quiver in her voice that broke Tanisha's heart and strengthened her resolve simultaneously. "It's okay, baby," she soothed, squeezing her daughter's hand while keeping her eyes on the security guard. "We'll go home soon. But first, we need to clear this up. Because we've done nothing wrong, and I won't let anyone say we did." The security guard's radio crackled, and through the glass storefront, Tanisha could see a mall police officer approaching. Her stomach tightened with dread. This Mother's Day was spinning out of control, transforming from a day of celebration into something that would leave scars, especially on Imani's tender heart. The mall police officer entered Rosenthal's, his hand resting casually on his belt. The atmosphere in the store grew even more tense, if that were possible. Tanisha felt the familiar tightening in her chest, that instinctive reaction many Black Americans know all too well when law enforcement appears in an already volatile situation. "What seems to be the problem here?" the officer asked, his gaze immediately settling on Tanisha rather than addressing the store owner who had made the accusation. Before Mr. Rosenthal could speak, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the tension. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." All heads turned toward Khalil Washington, the older Black man who had been browsing watches earlier. In his early 70s, Khalil carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had marched with King and weathered countless storms. His silver-threaded beard and immaculately pressed shirt spoke of a man who understood the power of presentation in a world that judged too quickly. "I've been in this store the entire time," Khalil continued, stepping forward. This young lady and her daughter looked at exactly one necklace, which Mr. Rosenthal removed from the case himself. Mr. Rosenthal's face flushed. "With all due respect, sir, you couldn't possibly have been watching the whole time. The blue topaz heart necklace was in this case this morning. Now it's gone." The officer looked between them, then back to Tanisha. "Ma'am, to resolve this quickly, would you consent to a search of your belongings?" Tanisha could feel rage and humiliation battling inside her. As a Black woman who had navigated white spaces her entire life, she knew the dangerous tightrope she walked. Express too much anger, and she'd be labeled the aggressive Black woman. Submit too easily, and she'd surrender her dignity. And worse, teach Imani that such treatment was to be accepted. Just 3 days earlier, she'd sat with Imani on their small apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Imani had come home troubled after a playground incident where a teacher had accused her of taking another child's toy, an accusation quickly disproven but carelessly delivered. "Mommy, why did Ms. Harper think I took Lily's toy? I never take things that aren't mine," Imani had asked, her small brow furrowed with the injustice that seemed so enormous in her 8-year-old world. Tanisha had taken a deep breath, weighing her words carefully. How do you explain centuries of bias to a child without breaking their spirit? How do you prepare them for the world's unfairness while preserving their innocence? "Baby, sometimes people make mistakes," she'd begun, tucking a braided strand behind Imani's ear. "And sometimes people have ideas in their heads about others based on how they look, not who they really are." "You mean because my skin is brown?" Imani had asked with the disarming directness of children. Tanisha had nodded, her heart aching. "Yes, sometimes because of that. Which isn't fair or right. But here's what I want you to remember. Your worth isn't determined by how others see you, but by who you are. Always stand in your truth. Hold your head high. Like Grandma Ellis says, dignity can't be given or taken away, only surrendered." "Exactly like Grandma says," Tanisha had answered, amazed at her daughter's recall and understanding. "And we don't surrender ours. Ever." Now, in Rosenthal's fine jewelry with all eyes on her, Those words echoed in Tanisha's mind. Stand in your truth. Hold your head high. I have nothing to hide, Tanisha said to the officer, her voice clear and steady despite the storm inside her. But I want it noted that I'm complying under protest. I've done nothing wrong, and neither has my daughter. The security guard gestured toward the back of the store. This way, please. I'd like to accompany them, Khalil interjected. As a witness. The officer hesitated, then nodded. That's fine. As they walked toward the office, Tanisha felt Imani's grip tighten. She looked down to see silent tears streaming down her daughter's face. Each droplet felt like a physical blow to Tanisha's heart. This was not what she wanted for her child, not the lesson she wanted Mother's Day to teach. It's okay, baby, she whispered, though they both knew it wasn't. Remember what we talked about? Standing in our truth. Imani nodded, wiping her tears with her free hand, her small shoulders straightening just a fraction. The security office was small and sterile, a desk, a few chairs, and a wall of surveillance monitors. Mr. Rosenthal followed them in, his earlier certainty seeming slightly diminished in the face of Khalil's intervention. Please place your purse on the desk, ma'am, the officer instructed. With deliberate calm, Tanisha complied. Her purse contained the usual chaos of motherhood: wallet, keys, a half-eaten pack of crackers, a small hairbrush, Imani's drawing of a butterfly from church that morning, a library card, and a lipstick. No necklace. The officer searched thoroughly, examining every compartment while Mr. Rosenthal watched with increasing discomfort. When nothing was found, the officer turned to Imani. Young lady, do you have any pockets or a bag? Before Tanisha could object to her child being searched, Khalil spoke up. Officer, surely you don't suspect this child of theft? Perhaps we should review the security footage instead. That would settle this matter definitively. The suggestion hung in the air like a lifeline. The officer nodded, turning to the security guard. Do you have camera coverage of the jewelry displays? Yes, sir. Full coverage. Then let's review the tape from the last hour. The security guard sat at the computer, fingers flying over the keyboard as he accessed the footage. The screen flickered, showing the jewelry store from an elevated angle. He rewound to when Tanisha and Imani first entered, then played it forward at normal speed. The footage showed exactly what Tanisha had described, she and Imani browsing. Imani spotting the silver heart necklace, Mr. Rosenthal approaching and removing just one necklace from the case. At no point did either Tanisha or Imani reach into any display case. There, Khalil said, pointing at the screen. Mr. Rosenthal, you can clearly see that neither of them took anything. Mr. Rosenthal leaned closer to the screen, his face a complex map of emotions: confusion, embarrassment, and something else harder to name. I don't understand, he muttered. I was certain there were 2 heart necklaces this morning. The security guard cleared his throat. Sir, if I may, I think I know what happened. He clicked through to footage from earlier that morning, before the store opened. Here, during morning inventory, they watched as Mr. Rosenthal himself walked through the store, checking displays. When he reached the case in question, the footage clearly showed him removing a necklace, the blue topaz heart, and taking it to the register area, presumably to clean it or adjust the price tag. But instead of returning it to the display case, he placed it in a drawer beneath the register. The silence in the small office was deafening. Mr. Rosenthal's face drained of color as recognition dawned. I remember now. I meant to put it in the window display, but got distracted when my first customers arrived. Tanisha felt a complex wave of emotions: vindication, lingering anger, and a bone-deep weariness. This wasn't just about a misplaced necklace. This was about how quickly he had jumped to accuse her, how readily he had humiliated her and frightened her child. The officer cleared his throat. Well, it seems this was indeed a misunderstanding. His tone suggested the matter was resolved. Case closed, no harm done. But harm had been done. Imani's tear-streaked face was evidence enough of that. Khalil Washington's deep voice broke the uncomfortable silence. I believe an apology is in order, Mr. Rosenthal. Mr. Rosenthal nodded, looking genuinely shaken. Yes, of course. MS. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Beaumont, Tanisha supplied, her voice cool. Tanisha Beaumont. Ms. Beaumont, I apologize for the mistake. I was absolutely certain, but clearly I was wrong. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. The word inconvenience hung in the air like an insult. What had happened wasn't an inconvenience. It was a degradation. It was the continuation of a pattern as old as the country itself. Tanisha looked at her daughter, then back at Mr. Rosenthal. Mr. Rosenthal, I accept that you made a mistake about the necklace, but I don't think you understand what really happened here today. Mr. Rosenthal's brow furrowed. I apologized. It was an honest mistake. The mistake was about the necklace, Tanisha interrupted, her voice steady. But the reason you immediately assumed I had stolen it, that wasn't a mistake. That was something else entirely. The room grew uncomfortable, the unspoken word racism hovering in the air between them. Mr. Rosenthal's face hardened slightly. Now wait a minute. I would have reacted the same way no matter who. No, Tanisha said simply. You wouldn't have, and we both know it. She took Amani's hand. We won't be purchasing anything today, and I think we're done here. As they turned to leave, Mr. Rosenthal called after her. Ms. Beaumont, please, your Mother's Day. At least let me offer you a discount on the necklace you were going to buy. As a gesture of goodwill. Tanisha paused at the door. My mother taught me that dignity isn't for sale, Mr. Rosenthal. Not at any discount. With that, she and Amani walked out, Khalil Washington following close behind. The walk through the mall felt endless, stairs following them as if news of the confrontation had already spread. Once they reached the main corridor, away from Rosenthal's storefront, Tanisha's composure finally began to crack. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her car keys in her purse. Ms. Beaumont, Khalil said gently, would you and your daughter like to sit down for a moment? Perhaps get something to drink. Tanisha looked at this stranger who had stood up for her, gratitude mixing with the storm of other emotions. Thank you, but we should get home. My mother will be wondering where we are. Khalil nodded in understanding. Of course, but please, take my card. He extracted a business card from his wallet. I'm Khalil Washington. I serve on the city council, and I also work with the Community Justice Coalition. What happened today? It shouldn't be ignored. Tanisha took the card, reading it quickly. Thank you, Mr. Washington, for speaking up in there. No thanks needed. We look out for each other. He knelt down to Imani's level. Young lady, you were very brave today. Your mother, too. Imani, still processing the events, gave a small nod. As Khalil walked away, Tanisha knelt in front of her daughter. Are you okay, baby? Imani's eyes, so like her father's, were troubled. Mommy, why did that man think we stole something? The question pierced Tanisha's heart. This was a conversation she'd known would come someday, but not like this. Not on Mother's Day. Not when Imani was only 8. Let's talk about it at home, she said, brushing a tear from Imani's cheek. With Grandma. As they drove home in silence, Tanisha's mind raced with thoughts she couldn't vocalize in front of her daughter. The incident replayed on loop, the accusation, the stares, the searching of her purse, the half-hearted apology. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles going white. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. But it was Imani's first exposure to the ugly reality that had shaped Tanisha's life, the presumption of guilt that came with her skin color. How do you protect a child from that? How do you prepare them without breaking their spirit? By the time they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, Tanisha had made a decision. This wouldn't end with a tearful drive home and a difficult conversation with her daughter. This time would be different. This time, there would be accountability. She took out her phone and the card Khalil Washington had given her. Her thumb hovered over the screen for just a moment before she began to dial. In her other hand, she still clutched the Mother's Day card Imani had given her that morning, its glitter now dulled, its message of love and celebration overshadowed by the day's events. But as she looked at her daughter's handwriting, to the best mommy in the world, Tanisha felt a renewed sense of purpose. Hello, Mr. Washington. This is Tanisha Beaumont. About what happened today? I've been thinking, what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else's child? Grandma Ellis was waiting at the kitchen table when Tanisha and Imani returned home, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea that had long since gone cold. One look at their faces told her everything she needed to know. What happened? She asked simply, opening her arms for Imani, who ran into her grandmother's embrace. As Imani buried her face in her grandmother's shoulder, Tanisha recounted the events at Rosenthal's, each word like acid on her tongue. She watched her mother's expression shift from concern to familiar pain to resolute anger. The same emotional journey generations of black mothers had traveled before her. So no necklace for Mother's Day, Tanisha concluded, attempting a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. Grandma Ellis shook her head. That's the least of my concerns right now. She stroked Imani's hair gently. How are you feeling, sweet pea? Imani pulled back slightly, her young face serious beyond her years. I was scared, but Mommy was strong. She didn't let that man be mean to us. Your mommy comes from a long line of strong women, Grandma Ellis said, her eyes meeting Tanisha's over Imani's head. In that look was a lifetime of shared understanding, the unspoken acknowledgement of what it meant to raise a black child in America, to prepare them for a world that wouldn't always see their humanity first. Later that night, after they'd made Imani's favorite dinner, mac and cheese with extra cheese, as comfort food was called for, and tucked her into bed with extra stories and reassurances, Tanisha and her mother sat on the small balcony overlooking the apartment complex's courtyard. I called him, Tanisha said softly, watching the distant headlights of cars on the highway. Khalil Washington, the man who stood up for us at the store. Grandma Ellis nodded approvingly. Good. What did he say? He connected me with a civil rights attorney named Cassandra Powell. We're meeting tomorrow. Tanisha turned to look at her mother. I'm not letting this go, Mama. Not this time. Grandma Ellis reached over to squeeze her daughter's hand. Your father would be proud of you, Tanisha. I certainly am. 3 days later, Tanisha sat across from Cassandra Powell in the attorney's downtown office. With her crisp blazer and no-nonsense demeanor, Cassandra had the air of someone used to fighting battles in courtrooms and corporate boardrooms alike. The security footage is conclusive, Cassandra said, reviewing her notes. Mr. Rosenthal clearly made an error, then immediately jumped to accusing you of theft. We have a strong case for racial discrimination. Tanisha nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Since Sunday, Imani had been having nightmares. She'd asked to stay home from school on Monday, claiming a stomachache that Tanisha knew was born of anxiety rather than illness. This morning, she'd been reluctant to let go of Tanisha's hand at the school drop-off. I don't just want money, Miss Powell, Tanisha said finally. Money doesn't fix this. I want change. Real change. Cassandra leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of change did you have in mind? Tanisha took a deep breath. I'm a librarian. I believe in the power of education, of stories. What if? What if we could get Mr. Rosenthal to really understand what he did? Not just the mistake about the necklace, but the deeper mistake, the assumption of guilt, the public humiliation, the trauma it caused my daughter. You want restorative justice, Cassandra observed, a note of respect in her voice. I want healing, Tanisha corrected gently. For my daughter, for our community, and yes, even for Mr. Rosenthal. Hate hasn't fixed this problem in 400 years. Maybe understanding can make a start. By the time 2 weeks had passed, word of what had happened at Rosenthal's fine jewelry had spread through the community. Khalil Washington had used his influence as a city council member to arrange a community forum at the library where Tanisha worked. The purpose? To discuss racial profiling in local businesses and work toward solutions. The evening of the forum, Tanisha stood nervously in the library's community room, watching it fill beyond capacity. Faces she recognized from the neighborhood, from church, from school functions. Faces she didn't know, but that reflected her own in shade and in the weight of shared experience. And, most surprisingly, white faces too, allies and concerned citizens who had heard the story and come to listen. In the front row sat Grandma Ellis with Imani beside her, the child's back straight, her expression solemn. Beside them was Khalil Washington, who gave Tanisha an encouraging nod. And there, standing awkwardly near the back wall, was Mr. Rosenthal himself. His presence had been arranged through careful negotiation by Cassandra. Initially resistant, he had ultimately agreed to attend. Whether out of genuine remorse or fear of legal consequences, Tanisha wasn't sure. But he was here, and that was a beginning. As the room settled, Cassandra Powell took the podium first, explaining the purpose of the gathering and setting ground rules for respectful dialogue. Then she introduced Tanisha. Walking to the front of the room felt like crossing an ocean. Tanisha had prepared notes, but as she looked out at the sea of faces, at her daughter's trusting eyes, she set the paper aside. 2 weeks ago, I took my daughter shopping for Mother's Day, she began, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. We were doing something ordinary, something joyful. And in the space of minutes, that ordinary moment became something ugly and frightening, something that has left scars on my daughter's heart and reopened old wounds in mine. The room was utterly silent as Tanisha recounted what had happened at Rosenthal's. She spoke not with anger but with dignity and clarity, describing not just the events but the emotions, the humiliation, the fear, the struggle to protect her child's innocence while standing in her truth. What happened to me at that store has happened to many of you, she continued, her gaze sweeping across the faces of color in the audience. Being followed in stores, being asked for extra ID, being treated like a criminal when you're just trying to live your life. These small indignities add up. They become a weight we carry. They become the warnings we feel compelled to give our children far too early. From the corner of her eye, Tanisha could see Mr. Rosenthal shifting uncomfortably. But this isn't about shame or blame, she continued. This is about awareness. This is about change. This is about creating a community where my daughter and every child can grow up without carrying that weight, without bracing for accusation with every step they take. As Tanisha concluded, the room erupted in applause. Others came forward to share their stories. A black teenage boy describing being followed by security every time he entered the mall with his friends. An elderly woman recounting how a cashier had questioned the authenticity of her credit card. A middle-aged professor who had been mistaken for a janitor in the building where he taught. Each story built upon the last, creating a tapestry of lived experience that was at once heartbreaking and powerful. Through it all, Mr. Rosenthal remained in his spot, listening, his expression unreadable. Then Khalil Washington took the podium. With the gravitas of his 70-plus years and his position in the community, he commanded attention without raising his voice. I've lived in this city all my life, he said. I remember whites only signs. I remember when the schools integrated. I remember when they said things were getting better. He paused, letting his words sink in. And in some ways, they have. But in others, he shook his head. The signs came down, but the assumptions remained. The laws changed, but hearts moved more slowly. He turned to where Mr. Rosenthal stood. Sir, would you come forward? I believe you have something to say to this community. A hush fell over the room as Mr. Rosenthal made his way to the front, his steps hesitant. Up close, Tanisha could see how tired he looked, the circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Good, a part of her thought. Let him lose sleep over this. I have. But as he began to speak, his voice shaking slightly, she felt the hard knot of anger inside her begin to soften, just a fraction. I came here tonight because I needed to, Mr. Rosenthal began. Not because my lawyer advised it. Quite the opposite, in fact. A nervous chuckle escaped him. I came because I haven't been able to forget what happened in my store that day. I haven't been able to forget the look on Ms. Beaumont's face, or on her daughter's. He looked directly at Tanisha. I told myself it was an honest mistake. Anyone could have made it. But listening to these stories tonight, I've had to face a hard truth. Would I have jumped to the same conclusion if Ms. Beaumont had been white? Would I have publicly accused her, called security, put her through that humiliation? The silence in the room was deafening. The answer is no, he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. And that's something I have to live with. That's something I have to change. He turned to address the wider audience. My parents opened that store 50 years ago, after fleeing persecution in Europe. They taught me about prejudice, about how it destroys. And somehow, I still carried it in me. I still acted on it. He shook his head, genuine emotion evident in his face. I'm deeply sorry. Not just to Ms. Beaumont and her daughter, but to all of you who have experienced what she did, in my store or anywhere else, I'm sorry, and I want to do better. As Mr. Rosenthal returned to his seat, Cassandra Powell took the podium again. Words are important, she said. Acknowledgement is a crucial first step, but real change requires action. She outlined a proposal that she, Tanisha, and Khalil had developed, a series of steps that Rosenthal's fine jewelry and other local businesses could take to address implicit bias and prevent racial profiling. Mandatory diversity training for all staff, a review of security practices, the establishment of a community oversight committee that would work with businesses to develop best practices and address incidents if they occurred. Mr. Rosenthal has agreed to implement these changes, Cassandra announced, and to fund training not just for his own staff, but for any business in the Metro Mall that wishes to participate. The announcement was met with surprised murmurs and then applause. It wasn't perfect, no single solution could be, but it was a tangible step forward, a commitment to change backed by resources and accountability. As the formal portion of the meeting concluded and people broke into smaller discussion groups, Tanisha found herself face to face with Mr. Rosenthal. "Ms. Beaumont," he said softly, "I know my actions caused real harm to you and your daughter. My apology in the store that day was inadequate. I was defensive, still thinking mostly of myself." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small envelope. "This isn't compensation. I know money doesn't fix this. It's a donation in your daughter's name to the library's children's program. I understand from Mr. Washington that you run it, and that it means a lot to you." Tanisha accepted the envelope, touched by the gesture that honored her work and her love for her community rather than attempting to put a price tag on her dignity. "Thank you," she said simply. "This will help a lot of children." "I've been thinking," Mr. Rosenthal continued hesitantly, "about something else I could do. My store has always done a Mother's Day promotion, but it's been, well, rather traditional in its approach. I wondered if you might help me design something more inclusive for next year, something that celebrates all kinds of mothers and families." Tanisha studied him for a moment, searching his face for signs of insincerity or manipulation. She found none, just an old man humbled by confronting his own biases, genuinely trying to find a path forward. "I think that could be a wonderful idea," she said. "But I'd like to bring some other voices to the table too. Other mothers from the community who might have perspectives different from mine." "Of course," he agreed readily. "The more perspectives, the better." Across the room, Tanisha saw Imani watching their interaction intently. What lesson was her daughter taking from this moment? That wrongs could be acknowledged and addressed. That change was possible. That standing in your truth could lead not just to pain, but to healing. She hoped it was all of these things. 1 year later, the Metro Public Library's community room was transformed. Colorful decorations hung from the ceiling, tables laden with refreshments lined the walls, and a banner proclaimed, "First Annual Mother's Day Community Celebration." Tanisha stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. The event, co-sponsored by Rosenthal's Fine Jewelry and several other local businesses, had drawn a diverse crowd. Mothers of all ages and backgrounds, accompanied by children, partners, friends. A true reflection of the community in all its complexity and beauty. Grandma Ellis sat at a table of honor with other community elders, holding court with stories that had the younger listeners alternately laughing and wide-eyed with wonder. Nearby, Khalil Washington chatted with Cassandra Powell, both looking pleased at the turnout and the positive energy filling the room. And there was Imani, 9 years old now, proudly showing other children the art station she had helped design, where guests could create handmade Mother's Day cards. Mr. Rosenthal arrived, less awkward than he had been at the community meeting a year ago, though still somewhat reserved. He had kept his word, implementing the changes promised, funding training not just for his staff but for other businesses, and working with Tanisha and others on redesigning his store's approach to Mother's Day. Not everything had been smooth. There had been resistance from some business owners, skepticism from community members with long memories of broken promises, moments when it seemed easier to retreat to separate corners than to keep doing the hard work of understanding and reconciliation. But they had persisted. And while one incident and its aftermath couldn't erase centuries of injustice, it had created a small but significant shift in their corner of the world. Ms. Beaumont, Mr. Rosenthal greeted her, extending a small gift bag. For you. Happy Mother's Day. Tanisha accepted the bag with a smile. Inside was a silver heart necklace, not unlike the one she had wanted to buy for her mother a year ago, but customized with Imani's birthstone. It's beautiful, she said genuinely. Thank you. Thank you, he replied. For your forgiveness. For the chance to do better. As Mr. Rosenthal moved on to greet others, Tanisha's gaze found Imani across the room. Her daughter caught her looking and waved enthusiastically, her smile bright and unguarded. In that smile was everything Tanisha had fought for, not just in the year since the incident at Rosenthal's, but every day of her life as a black mother in America. The right for her child to exist in the world without fear. The chance to be seen for who she truly was. There was still so far to go. One incident addressed, countless others occurring daily. One business changed, systems of injustice still firmly in place. One child's burden lightened, generations of trauma still to heal. But as Tanisha looked around the room, at the community gathered in celebration, at the bridges being built across divides of race and understanding, at her daughter's joyful face, she allowed herself to feel hope. Not the naive hope that denied reality, but the resilient hope that acknowledged hardship and chose to persist anyway. This was the legacy she wanted for Imani. Not just the warnings and the wariness that black children had inherited for generations, but also the knowledge that change was possible, that standing in your truth could lead to transformation. That dignity, once claimed, could never truly be taken away. Tanisha touched the silver heart at her throat, feeling its weight and warmth against her skin. Mother's Day would never again be just about pancake breakfasts and handmade cards for her family. It would always carry the memory of that terrible afternoon in Rosenthal's. But it would also carry this, the memory of a community coming together, of hard truths spoken and heard, of small but meaningful steps toward justice and healing. A reminder that love, in its fiercest form, could look like standing up, speaking out, and insisting on a better world for our children. And that, perhaps, was the greatest gift of motherhood. Not just the loving and protecting, but the constant, determined work of creating a world more worthy of our children's boundless potential. One conversation, one community, one Mother's Day at a time. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Have you or someone you know ever witnessed being judged unfairly? Drop a comment below, share your story. Subscribe for more powerful stories of injustice, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.